To see it in action, I'm back in app.js and I'll go back to my main Vue app, which is the one with this input field. Now I mentioned all those lifecycle hooks, and I mentioned that these would be methods you can add to your Vue app. And with that, I don't mean methods you add in your methods option, because in there you really only add the methods you plan on calling yourself or which you want to call upon events like clicks. Instead, you add them right next to data and methods, anywhere you want in this app. So for example here, towards the end of this app configuration object. Here, we could add the before create method, which I showed on the slide. You just add it as a method like this, and here we can console log before create so that we get an idea for when this runs. And of course, you could do more than just logging here. You could send an HTTP request to a server. You could set a timer. You could do whatever you need to do. If I now expand this again, open the console and reload, you see before create being logged here. And actually, I'll comment out this log message here at the very bottom so that we're not confused by that. So let's go back to our Vue app again then, reload, and we see before create. If we do something else and go to the sources tab here in the Chrome Developer Tools, we actually can also inspect our source code there. And I'm showing this to you here because there's something neat we can do with that. We can actually find the before create method here in the app.js file and click here to set a breakpoint. As a consequence, code execution will pause when this is reached. And if you now reload the page, you will see it pauses here, and you can always continue by clicking the blue play button. But the interesting thing, and the reason for why I'm doing this, is that you see there's nothing on the screen yet. As I mentioned, in before create, you won't see anything on the screen. At this point, actually, not even the Vue app will have been fully initialized. So let me click the blue button here to continue and remove the breakpoint by clicking on it again. Let's now add the second hook, which is the created hook. At this point of time, the Vue app was initialized internally, but it was not mounted yet. So visually, we'll still not see anything. If I reload in the console, we see created. And if we go back to sources and I add a breakpoint in the created hook now, if I reload, you see again at this point there's nothing on the screen, just as I explained. So let me remove the breakpoint and continue, and let's add more lifecycle hooks. The next hook in place is before mount. This triggers right before this app really is mounted. So right before we see something on the screen. So we'll still not see anything here, but we will see something in the next hook thereafter, which is mounted. So here, let me console log mounted. And let's then save this, go back to the JavaScript console and reload. And we see before create, created, before mount, and mounted. But again, it's more interesting if we go to sources and now add a breakpoint in before mount and in mounted. And now reload. And we first pause in before mount because that hook runs first. And you see nothing on the screen. If you now click resume, so this blue play button here, we pause on the next breakpoint, which is in mounted, and now you see something on the screen. As I explained, because at this point of time, this Vue app was mounted to the screen. It was initialized internally, all the data was processed, the template was compiled, and it's showing its output on the screen. So with that, we can also remove those breakpoints and resume again. Now with that, the creation lifecycle here is finished, but I mentioned that we would have data changes which also trigger their own lifecycle hooks. So let's see those in action as well. after mounted here, though as mentioned before, the exact position does not matter, but after mounted, I'll add before update and console log before update here. And I will also add updated. The difference will be that in before update, we'll not see the changes on the screen yet. In updated, we will. So if we go to the JavaScript console in the DevTools and reload, we don't see those hooks being executed because nothing was updated in this app. It was created, but nothing was updated. So now let's enter a new text here. And if I click set text now, you see before update and updated. And if we go to the source tab again and add some breakpoints in before update and an updated, we can also see that if I change this again, for example, to add more exclamation marks, we now pause and we first pause in before update. And you notice that the text output here on the screen is still the old one. Because as mentioned, in before update, the update was not fully processed yet. It's not visible on the screen. If I resume, we pause and update it, and indeed at this point of time, the output has been processed and is visible on the screen. So again, I'm removing those breakpoints and resuming, and that hopefully shows the updating process. Now, as mentioned before, we also can unmount a Vue app, even though we haven't done this thus far. We then trigger the before unmount and the unmounted hooks. And as also mentioned before, this unmounting process will become more relevant later. Nonetheless, let's see it in action now already. And for that, back in code here, I'm going to add the before unmount hook and console log before unmount. And I'm also going to add the unmounted hook and hence console log unmounted here, so that both those hooks are implemented and we log a message for them. But at the moment, this app will never get unmounted. We have no way of killing or removing it. But just as we have an app mount method, we also have an app unmount method to remove a Vue app. Now, you will rarely call this method in a real application though. Instead, you will later see a way more realistic scenario of unmounting apps. But at the moment, we're missing a key prerequisite for that, so we're going to work with that unmount method instead. We could set a timer here and set it to 3 seconds, let's say, and then have a function in which we call unmount, so that 3 seconds after the app was created and mounted, we destroy it, we unmount it. And if we now save that and reload, you will see that after 3 seconds, the app is gone on the screen and we see before unmount and unmounted. And of course, again, we could also go to the sources and simply add breakpoints here in before unmount and in unmounted, and reload and see how this pauses after 3 seconds. First in before unmount, at which point of time we still see the app, so that's the last chance to work with it. But then, if I resume, it's removed in unmounted. And that is the Vue lifecycle with all its hooks. In reality, you will only need a few of those hooks. Nonetheless, of course, I wanted to show them to you because this is the complete guide after all, and not the I show you some things guide. Nonetheless, we'll especially see hooks like created, mounted, or unmounted in action throughout this course, as well as updated. And with that, we can also leave this module. We now have a solid understanding of the basic features, and not just of how to use them, but also how they work under the hood. And with that, you already made a huge step in the right direction to becoming a Vue developer.